there.
Drop a note in the chat if you're with us. We are here for part 2 of policy talk. How do we talk with policymakers? And for those of you who missed part 1, I'll just, as a reminder, I'll let you know the guy sitting next to me spent 20 years on Capitol Hill in the U.S. As the chief of staff of a variety of policymakers. So he knows of what he speaks. And last time, Mark, it was fascinating to me to think about that audience, like your insight into audience fit, right? And like, don't bother trying to convince someone of an argument about something that they're not already interested in.
Right.
If I can sum that up. And you had a great quote. I'd have to go back to the tape, but the quote went something like, the most beautiful, effective, well-delivered pitch ever goes nowhere with an uninterested audience.
Yeah. And, for those who missed, it's, we have the recording like Andy just alluded to. So it's probably for sure up on Sounds
of Science Live. It's on our site.
Yeah, on the LinkedIn profile, you can find it easily there. But yes, yeah, and it's not like the representative or the senator has to have worked on the particular issue that you are coming in on, but is there a tie to something that the representative or senator actually either has worked on or has supported in the past, and that ties to your request, right? So if somebody is vehemently against offshore wind power, for example,
right,
don't roll in there asking for support for, a new initiative to put turbines off the coast of XYZ place.
Yes, that's awesome. I'm typing into the chat, just saying hi to people.
Oh, sure.
So one part of that was, are they interested in what you're selling? And the other part of that was, are you going to bring some sort of tangible in terms of job, monetary benefit, reputational benefit to their home district? So that's kind of the lay of the land, right? Like, am I strategically finding the right person to talk to? Do they care about what I'm talking about? And is the bill that I'm trying to get passed or the policy that I'm trying to get made, is it going to somehow benefit their constituency? And now I have part 2 for you. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I found the person. Now what?
Yeah. Many people do not do enough upfront research beforehand. So by doing that, you're already, leagues ahead of where most people are. That's the first thing I would say. So the second thing I would say, and this is again something that's a little bit under the surface, people might not think about this, is, I know who I'm going to talk to. The question is, before I even decide what am I going to say, it's worth checking off to think, am I the right messenger for this particular message? Meaning,
that's interesting.
You're right. Am I a constituent of the representative or the senator using the U.S., system of the U.S. Congress? Could, of course, be on the state level, local level as well. Why should they listen to me? Being a constituent / a voter immediately puts you on the other side of that velvet rope, so to speak, right? Because there's so many issues that need to be worked on. The elected official it's their job really only to focus on things that impact their district, sometime on a granular level. So if you had a number of people in your group, say somebody was a technical expert, somebody was really good, had experience in advocating, but neither of those people was actually from the district, it would be worthwhile to see, can I link up with someone who authentically shares our views, who's actually from the district, and that person can sort of be our initial point person into that office, like
Right.
making the
So
first
who's
contact
the
and
right
so forth.
messenger?
Hmm. Right, and that's a
So we need
profile of a good messenger.
yeah. Who's the right person to deliver the message?
Right, right.
And like what happens before? So you get the meeting. What happens before you get in the room?
Well,
Like like do they like if you send them stuff, do they read it? If you like, is it like a startup with a VC that you like send a pitch deck ahead of time? Is it like what's the
yeah. I'll tell you from personal experience, this time up there, it just so I want people to understand. So I worked up on the Hill for about 20 years. I was the chief of staff for one member, Ed Markey, in both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. So I only worked for one member first before college, after college and grad school, and then 6 years later they called me back after 9/11 and wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming back. So just the Markey office and chief of staff in the Senate and the House, as Andy said. Um, and so then as far as the ahead of time, there's just so much going on in these offices. The tempo can be hard to imagine if you haven't sort of experienced it yourself.
yeah?
And and so
So
as a
they're not
result,
reading.
it's highly unlikely that anyone's going to read it before. The first time they're probably going to
You know,
see it
Ed
when you walk in.
is Ed Markey. He's not still in politics, so if he sees you,
He still is a U.S. senator, yes, from
oh,
Massachusetts,
he
which is my
still
home
is.
state. Hmm.
So are you going to get in
Oh, yeah.
trouble with revealing that he doesn't read ahead of time?
No, I mean I was really talking about a staff level, but I mean realistically, I think
Oh, because you're
we're
not
all
even
grown
going to
ups
meet
here.
with him anyway.
Well, it's possible that you might, but
Yeah,
it's unlikely. He might get a briefing before the meeting. That's
yeah,
true. Um, and so a staff person, I wouldn't expect the person to have read anything beforehand. You can increase your odds, however, of that happening, or at least just a little bit of focus. Even a phone call, perhaps, could
yeah,
could help. I'm going to be coming in to talk to you and the boss, or and I just want to give you a very brief, like 2 minute kind of preview of what we're going to be talking about. It may or may not be worth your time to do that. Another thing that no one really did at the time, but people maybe now should start thinking about this, is even a short video clip of like, hey, just wanted to flag for you. I just sent you an email with a link. Again, the security, the cyber and IT security up there is really, really tight. But could I send you a brief, meaning like 1.5, 2 minute video clip, just to show you the technology that I'm talking about so you can visualize it? Again, not mission critical, but because so few people do this, it might be worthwhile to just try it and see,
yeah,
would it be helpful? Would it be helpful if I did that? And if the answer is no, or I'll try to take a look at it. But if you say
yeah.
it's really only like 90 seconds, then it's much more likely someone will at least glance at it.
Or just send it.
Yeah. And
Just send it with a.
you could send it. The person doesn't look at it, but you could bring it with you as well,
Right.
and you could have it, on your phone to show them.
Yeah. So how long typically is a meeting?
So varying lengths. There are meetings with the boss and meetings just at a staff level, and I don't want people to think that if you're meeting at the staff level, like that's a failure.
That's where it
Because
starts, right?
yeah, I mean the staff does a tremendous amount of work, and so meeting with the right staff person, like if it's a healthcare issue, I want to meet with the healthcare staffer. Defense
Yeah.
issue, like that. I don't want to be meeting with an intern.
Right.
So
So
because there's just
get
I don't know.
beyond the intern.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a problem to do that. It's just you want to make clear when you're sitting down, like, can you give me your card? Let me know your portfolio,
And then do
whatever.
you have 20 minutes? Like what's a
Yeah, I wouldn't plan on 20 minutes. I plan on well, actually less time. Maybe you could plan on 10 to 15. And
yeah,
if the meeting's going really well, like don't schedule in your own personal schedule if you've got other meetings, around. It's gonna only be 10 to 15 minutes, maybe just a lot of half an hour in your own schedule. But kind of think, look, I need to make my point. I know this is gonna go into where where we're going during this session is I really need to get my message across in 10, have this meeting like 10 to 15 minutes max.
So in the founder space, which I'm more familiar with, we do our one of the pitch competitions that I've been part of for the last 10 years. It used to be a 7-minute pitch with 3 minutes of Q&A. Now it's 5 and 5 with the Q&A often going to 7 or 8 minutes. So the pitch presentation space is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the conversation space
Hmm.
is getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
Do you recommend the same? If I have 15 minutes, I want to be taking questions at 4 minutes in or 5 minutes in, or do I want to actually talk for 12?
So really good question, and it also leads to a little nuance here with the meeting itself. I wouldn't expect the meeting to be so formal that the staffer is going to wait until the end for questions. It's a little. Imagine yourself in like an ante room, right, or a conference room with really dark furniture, dark wood furniture, blue or red carpet, depending on the partisan, the political party of the member you're talking to. It's not always like that, but a lot of memorabilia from the district or the state around, sending the message to visitors like the boss is in tune with the district, of course, has to be, and that's why your request also needs to be with respect to district or state. But
Yep.
don't expect that it's going to necessarily be so formal. The other thing that very few people actually anticipate, and this leads into sort of the Q&A, or at least that dialogue, because you really do want to get a dialogue going. You don't want this to be a one-way communication until some point in the conversation. What sometimes happens, and this is a little bit of a mindset shift for many, you spend all of you are really concentrated on developing your message. You figured out who should you talk to, and then who should be your messenger, and then you've honed your message, and you go into the office, and within the first 90 seconds you get, great, we're with you, 100% agree, happy to help, really glad to support what you're doing. And then people are like, well, but like in your mind you're like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
I just
Wasn't I supposed to have
started.
the kid?
Yeah, but
Wasn't
we
I supposed to
pre-screened you. We wouldn't have let
Yeah,
you come if we didn't
yeah.
weren't.
Wasn't I supposed to have to convince you? Like what? And people like get totally thrown off, and it's
So then what?
understandable. So exactly, and most so like, well, if you just like kind of fold up your stuff and like, all right, well, thank you. I mean, you're missing a golden opportunity. So I always say, don't take yes for an answer.
Don't
Um,
yes for an answer.
yeah, which is
All right.
basically
I got that I got that down as another quote for you.
yeah, yeah. And so really, when you get that quick yes, because understand this is where the mindset comes in. Politicians and their staffs, they want to say yes as much as possible. They want to make people in the district happy, right? Because they ultimately want the support of those people. And so generally, they want to do what you're asking them if you've done your homework and you've got everything crafted and targeted and all that sort of stuff. If you get a quick yes, it's like, oh, wonderful. Here's what I'm suggesting you think about. Oh, that's wonderful. Who else should we talk to, in parentheses, now that we're on the same team here? Who else do you think we should talk to
So now you
that could
switch
help
to
us?
we.
Right,
That's
exactly.
interesting. Now the
Yeah,
conversation's
yeah,
we.
yeah. Now we're on the same team,
And now
and
you're
we're
asking them a question.
sure. Like, given the topic, you think there's other places of support where we should go. What kind of obstacles do you think there might be, as we try to move this forward, right? And so, yes, you quickly pivot. Oh, it's a big thank you. Oh, that's such great news. I'm so glad to hear it, and I'm really excited to ask you or collaborate with you or team up with you on some of these. Now, some of these are pretty small asks. It could be like, would you sign something? Like the binary issue is kind of like, would you sign something? Yes. Would you co-sponsor something? When that kind of thing happens and you're not like sort of trying to move something larger or trying to, if you're trying to work on something that's going to be kind of a multi step, and sometimes these are multi-year actually
Yeah.
processes, um, then it could be a quick yes if it's a very small ask and there's really nothing else to ask for. But if you're trying to
Then
co-sign
you're
a letter,
done. But assuming you're not done, assuming there's more lifting to do.
yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll just say too with the letter, for example, would you sign this letter of support? If you're trying to get what's called a sign-on letter, show a lot of support by getting multiple members, you could say, who else should we talk to who could be a likely co-signer or likely co-sponsor if you're talking about a bill, a resolution. So it even works in that kind of context. But I think what you want to make, I want you to be prepared for a quick yes, right? If you do get a quick yes, you shift to we, and now we're on the same team. And now you want it to be this back and forth, and you want to look to see, can the office be a resource to, help us move this forward, almost like a champion to some degree. Don't use
Yep.
that word right away. It's like asking someone to marry you on the first date could like spook them, right? It's like I don't even know this person, and like all of a sudden I'm championing like what they, the boss.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to be like over eager in that sense. But if they've given your support, and give you a sense that they're ready to work with you, then don't just call it a day and leave. Start to probe a little bit, and make it a back and forth.
So do you go in with a list of questions? Like you're not doing that on the spot. You're going in prepped with, okay, if they say yes, here's the 5 questions we're going to ask them next.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And do you do
Yeah.
the same thing on the flip side? If they say no, is that the end of the meeting, or can you ask questions?
Oh, I think, yeah, again, this kind of goes to the point of like politicians and their staffs not really wanting to say no, in so many words. But I can hear
Right.
you're kind of hesitant about this. Can you tell me what's causing your concern? I always like think, and always sort of think about it this way. It's really good to get the other side's opinion, like the reasons why your thing shouldn't be supported. Because when you collect those, and when I was moving initiatives through, and we would hear in the press, and we'd hear on the House floor, we'd hear in internal communications, people putting out stuff against what we were trying to do. I always wanted to collect all those things
Right.
and I used to develop a point counterpoint document, and it was all about, here's the argument against that we heard, and here's why it's wrong in so many words. I would really call it a myth fact document, but that was also, putting kind of, a little bit of the thumb on the scale but it doesn't really
Right.
matter. It's like you want to know what the counter arguments are. So if you get something that's a little, you're unlikely to get a firm no, because you've done your research and you've crafted this right. That being said, if the more specific your ask is, the more clarity you'll get around support. If you sort of just say, I'd like the boss to support X, Y, and Z, sure, we support it. But then the question is like, what does that
What does
support look
support
like?
actually look like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you want the boss to do? And we used to get into the situation sometimes. People would roll in and they would talk all about some problem. It's really terrible. The water quality is really bad. And, the Army Corps of Engineers has worked on this and that, and, it just hasn't solved the problem. And so they're going on and on about the problem. I get that. But we're not in the problem framing business. Look, that's what you're supposed to do. So what is the ask? What do you want the boss to do as a result? Right? That's really important, and be as specific as possible, because if you're vague, you can get a very vague, oh yeah, we support that. And then like, but how do you determine if that support has been registered? Well, you have to basically tighten your ask. That might have sounded a little bit funny. You really have to be
So we're
specific
not in the
about your ask.
problem framing. We're in the what?
Problem solving, right? So helping to like, it's sort of like if you come to me, you come to the office,
So you
and
shouldn't go in there without an ask.
correct. Yeah. This isn't
Like
just like
what?
let's talk
What are
about
you?
how bad
What are
climate
you
change is.
asking? Like I get it. I get it. I'm not against solving your problem. What do you want me to do?
right. What do you
And
want the boss to do?
it's your job to figure that out before you go in.
Yeah, yeah. One of
So
the
so
common
your
phrases,
job is
yeah.
your job is, I come in and there's a water quality problem, and I I come in and have done my homework that there should be a 50-50 split between the or there should be a 30-30 split between, or let's just take it to the state level. There should be a 50-50 split between the state government and the local town government on fixing a lead pipe problem. So I come into the state government and you go, yeah, I get it. There's a lead pipe problem in our district. What do you want me to do about it? I'm like, well, I'm working with my local government to come up with 50%. What I'd like you to do at the state level is like craft a bill that creates $10 million or $50 million for matching funding for any town that's willing to replace lead pipes.
Along those
That's a specific ask.
lines, it just you wouldn't want to say. And the only addendum I would make to that is, and here is the draft language, because
Oh, you'd
it would.
actually, so you go all the way to having language.
Yeah, you could say here's a summary, or so if you said that to me, and I said, well, do you have draft language? And I say, well,
Really? Okay, cool.
not yet. And say, well, why don't you go put this together and we'll look at it. Doesn't mean that it's going to be accepted without any
Right.
changes. It just means that if you just said like draft the bill on this topic, it's like, no, I don't, I need more than just what you're giving me to actually really consider this, right?
So, so if I was going to try and sum up this concept of don't take yes for an answer, your homework before you go into the meeting is to go all the way down the food chain. Like go all the way down as far as you can possibly go with yeses. So you come in with a 5-minute pitch, and they stop you a minute in and say yes, and then you describe you describe the bill that you want, and they say yes, and then you give them draft language to the bill, and they say yes, and then you say who else should be on this bill, and they say yes, or they give you names, and then you say, are you willing to write letters to them, or do I need to go talk to them? Are you willing to write a note to them? And they say yes, and they like, I'm like, okay, my dream is that you do these 17 things, so I walk into the meeting with those 17 things preloaded, and I get as many specific yeses as I can.
Sure. I think you're unlikely. If you
I mean,
said,
you're not
I'm
going to
going
get all the way there, but the homework is to play out that scenario.
to, yes, and also providing some more. So let's just play this out. So if you rolled in, walked into the meeting, and you had, I'd love for the boss to drop this. You probably have heard all these problems about water quality and lead pipes in the district. Yes, I've been working really hard, with colleagues as part of this group to try to get some sort of cost share to get these pipes replaced, and at the state level, at the local level, and it's been really difficult because you probably know, like, there are these revolving funds and the way it works, but there's nothing explicitly about a cost share. And I think that's a real gap. So what we've done is, we've met with these different local groups and have a number of groups, who are working with us to come up with some draft language that we'd like to see. Is this something that your boss might be interested in introducing? So, well, let me take a look at it. Okay. You may have like some draft language. You may have some talking points. So the first question, I have would be like, well, who supports it and who opposes it, right? And so I haven't even given you a yes. I'm still in the process, but by the same token, these are things you would need to know, right? You'd need to know, like, I say, well, who were you working with? You'd probably know that, and I could say, well, what is the state or local, agency that works on water quality or infrastructure? What do they say? Have you met with them? No. Well, why don't you go ahead and meet with them? See, then what I'm kind of doing for you is I'm sketching out what you need to do, kind of like a roadmap, what you need to do, who you need to talk to, really before this is even considered. Because these are questions that the boss would ask, right?
Right.
He's not going to, in my case, he's not going to, support something until he has a full picture of like, what this is all about. What does the state think about it? What is, well, we don't know yet. We haven't met. Well, why don't you go back and meet with them and, make sure you kind of develop your coalition, or at least give us an understanding of where people are on this issue, right? Like my boss was a big environmentalist, my boss at the time. And so if somebody said that, the Environmental Defense Fund, Sierra Club, all the groups were opposed to what you're proposing, then it would be dead on arrival,
Right.
right? But I
And that's
wouldn't
part of the
necessarily know
homework
that.
ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a lot of baking
So what
that
I'm
has to
so what I'm
happen.
hearing is there's a lot of so this 10-minute conversation. There's potentially an hour of conversation. There's potentially an hour of script. I use that word loosely because I don't think you
Mm.
memorize it. But there's an hour of script that I have to be ready to have because I have no idea whether they're going to go left or right at each juncture. And each
Well,
juncture, I need to have, the first juncture is going to be a minute in, and I still have 9 minutes left. So if I go this way, I'm on this path. If I go this way, so I got to do a lot of work. I got to do a lot of work for this 10 minutes.
you do, but I think that it really depends on the ask, right? So it's almost like we've been talking about, will the boss introduce this draft bill, right? That's very different from, will the boss co-sponsor this bill that's already been introduced?
Right.
Will the boss co-sign this draft letter? Will the boss, make a call to XYZ agency, as we're trying to move this forward? So a lot of different flavors of asks, and each comes with it a certain degree of prep work that differs, both in the specific content and also in the length or degree of or level of effort, right?
Yeah.
And I think the bill introduction, is probably the heaviest lift. And what I'm trying to, sort of what I was thinking, as I'm speaking about that and sketching out, just things that you will be asked about if you go in and ask for, some, basically, that
Right.
the boss be a champion of the bill that you want. And so these are things that you haven't, beforehand, and you bring up as part of the discussion. I do have some draft language. We do have some support from X, Y, and Z. Well, who opposes it? I just remember another question that this is earlier on in my career. I was in a meeting, and they're talking about something, and I wasn't leading the meeting at this point, and so the advocate coming in is giving all the reasons why this is the best idea ever, and the senior staffer at the time said, "What are the arguments against it?" And that was like deer in the headlights. And then
Right.
the senior staffer said, "Well, you need to know the arguments against. You can't tell me there aren't any." There's,
Right.
always sort of, being on Capitol Hill for so long, I've got a cliche for every possible situation. There's your side, my side, and the truth, right? So there is there is some other there is some other side to
Right.
this. I like people to think about whenever you want to do something, it's like the political version of like Newton's law. Like every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So there is going to be a reaction. Not everybody is going to like
Not everyone's
or
going to
agree
like
with.
it. Right.
Yeah, when you want to make change and do something which is de facto different from the current status quo, there are
Right.
people invested in the status quo already, and there are constituencies for it. And so you want to change things, those people will react, and they may not react positively. And if they don't,
Right.
they're going to be putting out arguments on the other side, and you need to know what those are.
Right. So as kind of summary, couple of key takeaways. Um, be ready for a conversation, not not a okay. They're going to listen to me for 10 minutes and then I'm going to leave, and then but but be hopeful for a conversation, and do your homework. Do your homework on not only like the message that you're giving, but also the landscape and the details of the ask, who's supporting, who's not supporting, what the language might be, what the like. You gotta come with a pretty thick heart. Like you only have 10 minutes, but the prep for those 10 minutes is pretty thick.
Here's yeah, it's true. And I guess I would say from an expectations management standpoint, don't necessarily expect you're going to walk in there and in one meeting you're going to
Yeah, it's
get
not going to be right.
information on. And in fact, you could argue that that shouldn't even be your goal because you could present something and have some idea about the content and some idea about who would support. Again, maybe specifics on who
Right.
supports it or whatever. But you could also solicit some. I mean, if the office is putting the bill in, right, they're probably going to make some adjustments. So if you could get a little bit of a buy-in by kind of setting expectations right away. It's like we just started drafting this. Here's who we're working with, here's who, and so, and rather than here's a totally done, a
Right.
fully baked, it's never going to be fully baked, but here's something that, you know what I mean. So then it kind of does set up the next meeting. So I want to dialogue with you about this, get your input, get your thoughts on who we've talked to, who we might want to talk to, and then we're going to do another meeting. I'm going to go back and do more work, and we'll have
Right.
another connection.
Yeah. This has been awesome, Mark. I love it's like it's a real it's a real opportunity to just, and a treat to be able to listen to your experience and insight in this space. So I
Thank
appreciate being able to steer the conversation in this direction. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks, everybody.
Sure. Thanks for letting me get my mind back into that, into
Into
those
the
days. Because
policy space. Oh,
yeah,
I
because
love it.
it's already hardwired in the DNA. But thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, listeners, for being here. Looking forward to seeing you next time.